Hello everyone, this is Mr. Brass, and today I'll be doing a response to Armored Skeptic's video on abortion and the pro-death position in general.
What happened? What the hell happened? What direction does time go again? There's certain things that I've taken for granted. I know that you've done it too, and you just assume that because we live in a modern, enlightened society that we'll never have to live like the barbarians did again.
You do realize if it wasn't for the philosophical contributions, along with other contributions in general, by quote-unquote barbarians, we would have never made it to the point where we are now, i.e. apparently enlightened. Fun fact, we kill more people and animals now in wars and in getting food than the most violent, uneducated ancient barbarians in their wettest dreams could imagine doing. We aren't enlightened at all. We are just evolved primates with delusions of grandeur, who happen to have new toys to play with in our pursuit to kill each other.
Over the past several months, quite a few states have passed what they call a heartbeat bill, basically banning all abortions after a heartbeat has been detected. And as disconcerting as that is, that didn't stop Ohio from passing an even stricter bill banning all abortions after 5 weeks, including for pregnancies that resulted from rape or incest.
So basically, it's shocking to you that states are actually caring about the lives of their citizens, and they recognize killing a human who had nothing to do with the crime committed against their mother is wrong? Huh, good to know.
And I know what you're thinking. Well, what if a child was raped and she got pregnant? Well, you don't need to go there, because that's already a thing in Ohio right now. At the time that this law was passed, Ohio currently had a case of an 11-year-old who was more than 6 weeks pregnant.
So in this case, an 11-year-old girl obviously doesn't know she's pregnant 5 weeks into her pregnancy after being raped. She would no longer have a choice whether or not to carry that pregnancy to term. There are 4,000 women who are raped every year in Ohio. About 800 of those are products of incest. So people like these in the future would be the ones that wouldn't have abortion as an option in the future.
Isn't it presumptuous on your part to assume people who are raped will just flock to get an abortion, or that they should? Now, I believe the person who raped this 11-year-old should be punished to the fullest extent of the law, if not more. But shouldn't we ask the 11-year-old what she wants to do first before we dictate what she should do because of this situation? As the article by Sarah Terzo points out, most pregnant rape survivors choose to give birth with little regret, if any, over it. Now, opponents of the heartbeat bill will like to use the argument that women don't know they're pregnant at that certain point, therefore the law is wrong. Now, I need to remind you that an appeal to ignorance is a fallacy. Basically, they're saying, since I wasn't informed to be pregnant, therefore I don't have to be pregnant. Also, if you're going to be logically consistent and mere ignorance is all that is needed to justify that abortion, then you have to allow for till delivery abortions, because 1 out of every 7,225 pregnancies is unknown to the mother till delivery.
Are you supposed to just rattle a coat hanger up there once a week just to be safe? This can only result in more teen and child mothers, more people dying because of pregnancy, more people being pushed into the foster care system, more homeless people, and it's ultimately just going to end up pushing abortions underground.
What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Contrary to popular belief, Greg, women aren't stupid and know about antibiotics, and they know how to bribe doctors into giving them abortions even when it is illegal. Also, this may sound heartless, but I don't really have that much empathy for a person who is so committed to killing someone else that they're willing to kill themselves in the process, or to die trying to, I should say. Their right to life ends when they actively try to kill someone else. As this video points out, as early as 1955, it was shown by Planned Parenthood themselves that 90% of all illegal abortions were done by physicians themselves. This whole widespread back alley abortion thing is a myth, and it is like the Christian God to pro-death advocates, as there's little if any evidence for it. People will till their blue in the face claim it's real with the same debunked arguments, and they will use their belief in it to justify killing others. as this video shows, more women died from legal abortions than illegal abortion when Roe v. Wade was first passed. Why don't you care about women's health, Craig? Also, isn't one of the pro-death movement's main arguments for the justifiability of baby genocide the notion of overpopulation? I mean, if you seriously believe that we have an overpopulation problem and that abortion restrictions will result in more deaths, shouldn't you be pro-abortion restrictions then? A massive number of deaths would result in less people and help the overpopulation issue.
So Matt said, if a 12-year-old is raped by her father, and the father takes her to get an abortion, the evidence of the crime will be destroyed, and he will go on molesting his victims for years. But all this is because you want evidence? You don't think that the abortion doctor will be wondering, hey, why is this 12-year-old getting so many abortions?
Why would the abortion doctor care? I mean, he/she is getting paid by the abortions and could just say that the little girl is just promiscuous. I mean, this is like saying a Burger King worker should be concerned with a fat piece of shit like myself going in every so often to buy 10 quadruple Whoppers. Also, isn't it funny that it's the religious person here wanting to get more evidence while the quote-unquote skeptic is the one who doesn't want any?
That implies, first of all, that having the child itself and being pregnant with the child is not a form of abuse, which I would argue it is.
Great, so you are saying motherhood is a form of abuse. That's good for you ladies to know about, Greg.
Stephen, I would argue that forcing a woman to carry an illegitimate child that was not made of love is an act of evil.
It's not an act of evil to say that an illegitimate child made from a loveless relationship deserves to live. Rape, while evil, is not an excuse for adopting biblical notions of sins of the father passing down to the child. I mean, I thought you weren't for pro-biblical morality in that regard, Greg.
And I gotta say, it was a pretty dumb move of faith to call another woman a slut, because before you know it, another woman's gonna come in and say that you're the slut because you slept with Richard Spencer, and then Richard Spencer's girlfriend's gonna come in and confirm the fact that, yeah, she did in fact have sex with a Nazi.
Sleeping with one bad guy a slut doesn't make. At best, it makes the person a bad judge of character. Also, appeal to hypocrisy fallacy. Merely saying she's a hypocrite doesn't show she's false.
Life is a right. In fact, unlike abortion, which is not a right, life is specified directly in the Declaration of Independence, as well as the Fifth of blah, 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 blah. And as June pointed out, that this argument is always, 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 always made by people who don't think that healthcare is a right.
Appeal to hypocrisy fallacy again. Just saying that Ben Shapiro is a hypocrite for not believing healthcare is a right, by the way, it isn't showing that his position is wrong. Rights work in the negative sense. You have the right to own a gun, and no one should be able to come and steal your gun from you, and you have the freedom of speech, but that doesn't mean you have the right to take someone's platform so you can speak on it, or that society owes you money so you can make your own platform to speak on. The idea that you have a right to be cared for when you are sick implies that you have a right to someone else's time, labor, and money, i.e. that you believe that you have the right to have a medical slave and the right to make someone else pay for you to have a medical slave. You have the right to have health care in whatever legal way you can, in my opinion. These rights are assessed, you can say, from conception.
So life is a right, but as soon as you come out of your mother, you could die on the floor right there, and they would do nothing about it.
Actually, Greg, that is what the pro-death advocacy movement promotes in the Democratic Party, with them really not wanting to stop treatment for babies who survive abortions, which you even bring up later on in the video, so it's sort of stupid for you to criticize others on, as most pro-lifers I know, including myself, are against that.
In fact, it worries me a lot just how concerned Republicans are with what you do with your own body. Stay out of my bedroom.
It's not you or the girl's body in dispute here. Also, laws exist to tell people what they can and can't do with their bodies. A law against your girl breaking into my house and strangling me to no death, strangling me to death for no good reason, is a law against her using her own hands, i.e. her own body, for that purpose. Abortion restrictions and bans are no different than that. No one is telling you who you can and can't have sex with. If you want to have orgies with multiple women every day, you are free to do that, and I would be against anyone trying to make laws against you doing that. However, it's different saying that you have the ability to sleep with multiple people every day, if you so choose to, and saying that you have the right to avoid the consequences of sleeping with multiple people every day.
And just to give you an idea of the kind of people we're dealing with here. Oh, and don't forget, if you have the baby, even if convicted of rape, he can still sue for custody. If he's the dad, then so be it. He has the right as a father. And yes, this sounds barbaric, because it is. This is a biblical Christian mindset. The Bible says that if your daughter is raped, then the man who raped her has to marry her and pay reparations to the father for damaging his property.
Christians aren't under the Old Testament covenant. As you know, that guy Jesus that Christians talk about so much, he had their back on that, and now they don't have to do it. I swear, lack theists are like people who say that you are bound by an expired coupon for peanut butter to buy more peanut butter. Also, I assume you are referring to verses 22, 28 through 29 in the book of judicial wisdom known as Deuteronomy. By the uses of the words tafas and shakab, along with the lack of chazak, it is clear that this is referring to seduction and not rape, i.e., it is saying that if a man seduces a girl and they have sex, he must marry her. This may surprise you, Greg, but if you lived in biblical times, you'd understand the notion of more scarce resources and needing to control sexual behavior so as not to result in your people starving. You're also being anachronistic by applying post-industrial revolution luxuries of marriage to ancient people who had no concept. Marriage was a sort of business deal where women and men got something out of it, and even if you were talking about rape, it's very well possible the woman would demand this arrangement so as to secure her financial protection forever. Marrying for love was a rarity back then for both men and women.
The woman is still going to notice a baby growing inside of her, and that baby's going to serve as a constant reminder of the worst moment of her entire fucking life. The fruit of a traumatic and humiliating violation protruding out of her for the entire world to see. Depending on how she does it, even if she ends up giving the child up for adoption, her body will still end up bearing permanent scars. And then, if she ends up keeping the child, there's this whole new set of challenges because the child's going to bear a resemblance to her assailant.
Greg, may I remind you that getting an abortion, i.e. a very personal and violent operation to a woman's private parts, by a most likely male doctor, might not be a good thing for a woman who got raped by a man who humiliated her and assaulted her also in a violent manner. What you are basically saying is, hey girl, I know you just got raped and impregnated and all, but hey, here is a male doctor who will perform a very personal, violent, and as described by some humiliating operation to the very private parts that were assaulted and violated previously. Because you know, I wouldn't want you to be reminded of the rape. Abortion doesn't unrape the woman, it just punishes a bystander with death and potentially adds one more thing for an already traumatized woman to suffer from. Abortion also can have complications, which a woman can suffer from for long term. So I don't see how you're necessarily avoiding permanent scars one way or the other. Also, as pointed out, a woman who was raped could see a child as the one good thing that came out of the bad situation, and it could, instead of being a detriment to coping, could actually be a help with coping with the rape. You are not the dictator of women's feelings on this.
I hear this argument a lot, and I think this perfectly encapsulates the fundamental difference between the two sides on this issue. Women shouldn't have to see a rape baby as their baby if they don't see it as a legitimate child because they did not choose to have it, because it was forced upon them. Then they don't have to bear that child.
Whether a woman considers a child legitimate has no bearing on whether the child is hers or not. Women can say a child is or isn't legitimate for a number of reasons. Whether it goes from, like you said, rape, or it can be just because she didn't enjoy the sex her husband gave her that got her pregnant, or it can be that she had the flu at the time. A woman who cheats on her husband and has a bastard child may consider the child illegitimate, but it's still her child because she, if nothing else, is a participant in the act. Willing or non-willing aside, it would still be as much of an objective factor of reality as 2 + 2 = 4 that the child is her, irregardless of the feelings about the child.
However, restricting all abortions, at very least, you have to admit, is going too far. The government does not exist to tell us what to do with our own bodies. The government does not exist to dictate how we run our own families. Only we can know what's right for us.
Ideally, I'd love the government not to be involved with this at all, and that people just would realize abortion is wrong and not do it. There is no going too far when it comes to wanting to stop human rights violations. It's like saying that the idea we should ban all forms of slavery is going too far. I don't like abortion, and I don't really like government, but at the same time, I feel that this is one of the rare moments where government has the power of acting like a cultural moral shifter and help push this country in a direction where we can come to understand abortion is wrong more, and thus won't need the government to act any further. With these restrictions, people will not have the luxury of just saying, well, I can just fuck whoever I want without consequence to myself or society, and it would motivate people to take sex more seriously. As I always say, you can either be pro-science or you can be a pro-death advocate. You logically can't be both. As Michael J. New in his paper analyzing the impact of the U.S. anti-abortion legislation in a Casey era shows that pro-life laws, i.e. laws like restricting public funding of abortion, informed consent laws, parental involvement laws, etc., reduce abortion rates.
And I get that the point of this is not to make it stick, but still Alabama and all these heartbeat bill states have really spit in the face of everything that makes Western culture what it is. I really want to emphasize just how immoral, inhumane, and unbiblical this bill is.
For one, I don't give a rat's ass about the Bible when it comes to lawmaking, as I'm not for making a theocracy. Also, what makes Western society great, as you call it, included the very fact that throughout most of recorded Western history, the Hippocratic Oath and its ethics was against abortion, prevailed throughout the nations. If there is anything that spits in the face of Western society, it's pro-death advocates.
It's funny that I think even as an atheist, I make a better Christian than the average Christian. So the laws of God actually allow abortion, believe it or not, and I can prove that. So if you say that you're doing this because of God, you're actually taking God's name in vain.
Now, if you are going into the numbers and the ordeal of bitter water, that wasn't talking about pregnancy but dropsy, as Josephus mentions. Also, isn't it sort of retarded to suggest that ancient people who relied more extensively on children to survive would be for killing them? Also, taking Yahweh's name in vain has to do with making false oaths with Yahweh.
Number 1, life starts at conception. Jesus did say that a fetus is a person at the moment of conception, but God said that a person is a person when they breathe in God's air or whatever. So basically their first breath. Wow, the Bible has contradictions! Amazing! But even just going by Jesus' standard that a person is a person when they're conceived, it sort of sounds like he's saying don't abort them, but he doesn't. It's not really what he's saying. Jesus instead on the Sermon on the Mount said that God's law is here to stay and that he's here to fulfill it.
The notion that life begins at conception is just a scientific fact and it isn't a religious thing. Just pick up really any medical textbook on the subject. So on top of being theologically illiterate, you are also scientifically illiterate. So much for the So much for the skeptic and science advocacy thing. Yes, Jesus fulfilled the Old Testament laws, and that's why they don't apply to Christians. You never provided the verses of the video, so as Hitchens said, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Argument number 2, God sees all life as precious. And that's the one that Ben Shapiro used, the sanctity of life. Well, in Deuteronomy 28, God says that as punishment, he's going to make people eat their own children. Which is apparently something that happens. In Hosea 9, God was asked by the prophet to punish the Israelites by making them barren, and God obliged this request by promising to kill the babies while they were in the womb, but in a way that shows sanctity, I'm sure. Plus, let's not even mention all the times that God ordered the Israelites to slaughter entire cities and genocide entire populations, including pregnant women, by the way, and children. In 2 Kings, the Israelites literally ripped the babies out of the wombs with their swords. In a way, again, I'm sure, that shows sanctity of life.
With Deuteronomy 28:53 through 63, which is where I'm assuming you're going with this wasn't a command, nor was Yahweh saying he wanted this to happen. This was laying out what happened under siege warfare, and if they failed to do X, this is what will result from it. It's sort of like saying a parent who tells their child not to play in traffic because they will get hit by a car is somehow commanding their child to get hit by a car or something. This was all conditional, and this is what their actions would lead to, with Yahweh not being involved in it at all. Yahweh would simply allow them to make their own choices. This is basically the same case with 2 Kings as well. Hosea 9:11 through 16, as I assume you are referring to, is Hosea asking for mercy from Yahweh, as he knows that judgment is coming upon the people if they don't change their ways, and that it would be better for no child to have to be hurt from that judgment. Please note, Yahweh really does nothing in this besides turn his back on his people and leave them to their own devices. Everything that happens to them is their own fault. Yahweh is merely withholding protection from them because they clearly have shown they don't want it. If by genocide you mean to a good extent defensive judicial judgments upon human rights violators that seek to destroy them as a nation and not as a people, then you are correct. Genocide, as scholar R.J. Rummel pointed out and as professor of political science Tata Matan maintained as the common meaning in his book Recent Genocidal Nightmares, genocide is the government killing people for their indelible group membership, i.e. race, nationality, sexuality, etc. The killings were based on behavior, not indelible group membership. Yahweh would also be the author of life, and thus he can do what he wants with it.
When it comes to the ideals behind new abortion laws, unfortunately, reality does not bend to the will of our ideals. You have to allow for all possibilities. You have to allow for freedoms. Even if you think these people are making mistakes, it's their mistake to make.
You hear that, guys? Slavery is back on the table. You know, according to Greg here, it would be immoral to want reality to bend to our ideal of living in a non-slave owning society, and we have to allow people to have the freedom of owning slaves, and it would be immoral to say that a person doesn't have the right to use their body in a way that amounts to having and owning slaves. Well, that is all from Craig's video. I hope you guys like the video. This is Mr. Brass saying goodbye and get wise.